A table and a computer rest in an office in the heart of Seoul. Everything is exactly the same as every morning. Your latte, your Hello Kitty sticker on the corner of your laptop, and your messy Shinhan Bank background with files scattered everywhere. Everything is the same, yet somehow everything feels different. Yesterday, you finally got the promotion you'd been waiting on for almost 7 years. You haven't even been online for a second when a wave of messages starts pouring up. Congrats! Well deserved! Guazhang! Everybody knows. Perhaps you shouldn't have posted about it on social media, but who cares? This is your moment. You reply to a few colleagues and then log into your email. Knowing your boss, he's probably already sent you a few emails with detailed instructions about your new role. You scroll up and down, but the information you're waiting for is nowhere to be seen. Just more emails, mostly congratulations. But wait, what was that? A particularly strange subject line catches your eye. Just for you. Curiosity is killing you. You click. Inside, there's just one single line. This is a small celebration, just for you. Below it, a link. You don't recognize the sender, but the email seems legit. It even has the Shinhan domain. Perhaps somebody heard about your promotion and decided to send you a cute or a funny video. You check the clock. It's not even 8. You can definitely sneak in a quick video. Click. An Internet Explorer page opens. It loads and loads, but then freezes. You close the window and click on the link again. Still loading. As you stare, distracted at the loading circle, a new email comes in. And this one is from your boss. Okay, no more distractions. You close the strange tab and get back to work. What a silly email. But that silly email wasn't that silly. Someone, somewhere, has been watching you for a while, and your promotion turned out to be the perfect way in. You have just been hacked. Now somebody has everything. Your credentials, your data, the bank's credentials, the bank's data, all of it filtered and quietly sent to a hotel room in China. And when the time is right, your computer will become the host of something else. You won't even notice. Not yet. The malware will be infiltrated slowly, quietly, and made dormant over the next 2 months. And on March 20th, you will become the seed that poisons the entire crop. At 2 p.m., 48,000 computers are hacked, paralyzing the whole capital of South Korea. Banks, hotels, hospitals, and TV stations all go dark for an entire day. A day after which there was no rollback. Welcome to South Korea, the land of smooth pop, smooth skin, and questionable plastic surgery. But before this small peninsula became a world leader in exporting soft power, it was one of the least developed countries in East Asia. After the Korean War, South Korea was devastated. The population was poor, largely illiterate, and struggling to survive. But in the 60s, with the help of its war ally, the USA, the country crafted an ambitious plan to turn its economy around, the chaebol system. The system was designed so that a handful of family-controlled conglomerates would dominate exports and international trade. In return, the government supported them with fewer taxes and, at times, with financial aid to prevent bankruptcy. The strategy worked. The 1970s saw South Korea's economy rise from its ashes in what is now known as the miracle on the Han River. And having learned that innovation paid off, the government set its sights on a new milestone: the Internet. The digital investment promised 2 things. First, it would help the country catch up with the development of other capitalist nations. And second, it would help to combat the financial crisis spreading across Asia. Fast forward to 2010, and the investment had once again paid off. South Korea earned the title of the bandwidth capital of the world, with 81% of its citizens connected to the Internet, making it one of the most online countries in the world. But this rapid digitalization also came with a price. This new, hyper-connected state carried a myriad of opportunities, but also new vulnerabilities, ones that could be exploited, especially by a particular neighbor who still holds a 30-something-year-old grudge against you. If you know one thing about North Korea, it's that it went the opposite direction. Initially, it sided with the communist powers, but after the Cold War, the country decided to seal itself and apply a self-sustainable economy. So, while South Korea, With the US support invested in military defense, technology, and infrastructure, North Korea's self-reliance was simply insufficient to survive, and unfortunately, the country suffered a gruesome famine that left it deeply impoverished. Yet, not all was lost. The North closely observed their neighbors' technological transformation and quickly understood something. It was a double-edged sword that could work in their favor. Before we discover what North Korea was plotting, make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. We have poured a lot of sweat, caffeine, and sleepless hours into every episode, so your support would really make the difference. Thank you so much. In January 2013, cameras flashed as three men stepped off a China Airlines flight. Google chairman Eric Schmidt, director of Google Ideas Jared Cohen, and former governor Bill Richardson. Their faces were tired, and their smiles quite awkward. They had just landed in the Democratic Republic of North Korea. This was a somewhat controversial trip for Google, especially given the increased tensions between the US and North Korea. But Kim wasn't about to miss the opportunity to feed tech billionaires first-class North Korean propaganda, and the tech elites weren't about to pass up a chance to look behind one of the biggest digital curtains in the world. They visited the top tourist fabricated attractions, ate perfectly arranged meals, and spoke with common citizens that were definitely not forced to greet the tech billionaires. But something changed when they entered the offices of higher-ranking officials. Computers everywhere, and not just regular computers, but brand new Apple devices. North Korea had learned an important lesson by watching its neighbor. The internet can be a tool for growth, but also a valuable weapon for war. That's why Kim Jong-il pushed to turn the World Wide Web into the core of North Korea's next strategy: cyber warfare. Unlike conventional warfare, cyber warfare has a relatively low cost of entry, anonymity, and plausible deniability. Additionally, it cannot be monitored as closely as regular military development, which leaves plenty of room to experiment without worrying about too much international scrutiny or potential sanctions. North Korea's computerized warfare foundations were built in the 1990s. This includes technical training, cyber-based psychological operations, and the establishment of the General Staff Reconnaissance Bureau, North Korea's intelligence agency. Its first major operation was conducted in 2009, when North Korea launched a DDoS attack on several United States and South Korea financial and governmental websites. A DDoS, or Distributed Denial of Service attack, floods websites with millions of requests, overwhelming them and shutting them down. Very simple, but also very effective. In fact, it's estimated that the 2009 attack cost around $36 million in damages. 2 years later, North Korea launched a more complex strike, this time targeting a major South Korean bank, affecting 30 million customers who were left without access to ATMs for days. Here we introduce another significant player in the story, the NIS, the National Intelligence Service of South Korea. Founded in the 1960s, this agency is in charge of monitoring both domestic and international cybersecurity threats. And while North Korea was building its cyber army, NIS was watching very closely. I mean, we're talking about a state so weary of its neighbors that it even restricts Google Maps. So South Korea responded. In 2010, it created a cyber command, and 1 year later, a cyber police team. And soon after, they drafted a national cybersecurity master plan to consider cyberspace another operational domain, like the nation's land, air, and sea. But if the NIS was so aware, how did North Korea keep breaking through? Well, unfortunately, both the NIS and South Korea had domestic issues. Big ones. First, the country's tech boom had outpaced its cybersecurity. Companies and government systems poured money in innovation, but not security. In 2013, the government's budget for information protection was just $214 million. And even though this looks like an astronomical figure, it's a very small sum if we compare it with other technologically advanced countries, like the USA, which spent $46 billion during that year. The NIS, too, was facing internal chaos. In 2012, it was accused of meddling in South Korea national elections to help re-elect President Park Geun-hye. This meddling was followed by an investigation where NIS claimed it was a way to protect South Korea from North Korea's influence. The final verdict? Only self-reform. Citizens were infuriated. And rightly so, because this was not NIS's first rodeo. Back in 2001, they had been caught wiretapping opposition leaders and several civilians. For many South Koreans, the NIS had become a symbol of corruption, a mere government tool used under the excuse of national security. Now, last but perhaps more worrisome was a third problem: manpower. By 2013, South Korea had 400 individuals dedicated to cyber warfare, whereas it estimated that North Korea had around 3,000. And not only that, but many experts warned that the military was unprepared to face North Korea's growing cyber capabilities. South Korea, the digital miracle, was far more vulnerable than it realized. And if North Korea could already breach NIS's defenses in its early stages, what would happen once they had a couple years to fully mature? In 2012, North Korea announced the launch of a new rocket, which looks something like this. Apparently, it carried a satellite that would be used for weather monitoring, but the international community quickly noticed that this was not an innocent mission. It was a nuclear test in disguise. Pyongyang had withdrawn from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty back in 2003, and despite several years of talk and hopes, each passing year made things more clear. Nuclear power was still a top priority in the North's domestic agenda. So when Pyongyang announced the launch of the rocket in 2012, the international community understood the message. North Korea had no interest in changing its ways. The United States and its allies responded with a resolution that condemned the launch and imposed several economic sanctions. North Korea responded with anger. Its war rhetoric increased, and a year later, it proudly conducted a new wave of nuclear tests, including a particularly powerful underground explosion that triggered an earthquake of magnitude 5.1 in North Korea and some provinces in China. At some point, the UN decided to take more serious measures and restrict the country's ability to trade. Even China, North Korea's long-standing ally, reportedly began limiting work opportunities for North Koreans. Kim Jong-un was not happy. In response, North Korea rescinded all peace pacts with South Korea and closed the main Panmunjom border crossing inside the Korean demilitarized zone. Then, on March 13th, Pyongyang ended the 1953 Korean Armistice Agreement. Technically, this meant that the two Koreas were once again at war, even if the hostility only flowed one way. A few days later, North Korea revealed an interesting fact. According to its state media, South Korea and its U.S. allies had launched a cyber attack against North Korea's networks, causing a multi-day internet outage that affected an estimated several thousand internet users, mostly believed to be government officials. There is limited evidence to confirm this, although it's still known that NIS had been conducting covert cyber operations in North Korea. Still, this particular incident was reported only by Pyongyang. Meanwhile, the United Nations established a special commission to investigate human rights abuses in North Korea, and this was its first formal inquiry to prosecute alleged crimes against humanity within the regime. The pressure was mounting. North Korea had to take a step back and rethink its strategy against the West. At the center of this chaos, Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il's son, had just seized power. As the country's leader, he had several eyes on him, and rumor says senior officials were unconvinced. Young, inexperienced, and less tenacious than the previous Kims, he needed to prove himself, not only to the world, but to his own circle. So he began looking for a way to strike back, a move that could remind everyone that North Korea was far from powerless. Perhaps this crisis could be a blessing in disguise after all. On March 20th, at exactly 2:30 p.m., a crowd of journalists at YTN, a 24-hour TV news station in Seoul, rushed frenetically around their offices in desperation. Their computers were not working. Windows icons were gone, and a black screen greeted them with "Boot device not found. Please install an operating system on your hard disk." Confusion spread quickly, but nobody panicked, at least not yet. It wasn't the first time they had issues with their office computers. IT staff jumped in to take a look, while journalists chatted and waited. Then, minutes later, reports started to come in. It wasn't just YTN. Other media outlets were hit too. And worse, Seoul's biggest banks, Shinhan and Nonghyup, were also down. YTN quickly managed to get some backup systems running and went live to report on the situation. South Koreans tuned in, watching in disbelief. Hundreds of computers were destroyed, online transactions were frozen, and most alarming of all, ATMs were inoperable. South Korea was under a massive cyber attack, and no one could pinpoint what type of beast they were dealing with. All they knew was that the threat actors, whoever they were, had infected the MBR of thousands of computers. The MBR is a crucial component of a computer storage device. When you turn your machine on, the MBR tells it what to do and where to find the operating system, which makes everything else run smoothly. Running the MBR is similar to turning on the light switch in a dark room. No MBR essentially means no computer. MBR remained the standard until the 2010s, when it was switched to GPT, a type of storage that provides a more flexible mechanism for partitioning disks. Now, if all companies had instantly switched to GPT, the Dark Soul attack probably would not have happened. But during that time, South Korea's cybersecurity, much like the rest of the world's, was not catching up as fast. So perhaps this detail played a role in the attack. Still, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Dark Soul employed several malicious techniques and 3 main components: a dropper Trojan, an MBR wiper, and a remote access Trojan. Investigators are generally on the same page on what components took part in the attack. However, regarding how it was conducted, the Dark Soul incident becomes a bit of a mystery. We don't know the attack's primary vector, and we also don't have a clear theory on the relationship between the different components. However, the result of the attack did not change. Computers were wiped clean, and their data was exfiltrated. But we will get back to that. First, let's focus on how the attack was planned and executed. There are several theories on how it was delivered. The most widespread theory is that the malware was distributed via a compromised patch management software from South Korean antivirus maker OnLab. Attackers likely infiltrated the software and slipped in their own malicious patches. So when customers thought they were installing a legitimate update, they were actually installing the malware. Another theory is that Dark Soul was a watering hole attack, a type of cyber attack where threat actors compromise frequently visited websites to infect visitors. In this case, they breached the Korea Software Property Rights Council website and used it to redirect the victims to a site they controlled. Then, through a JavaScript exploit, they injected malware directly into victims' systems. The last theory is a spear phishing campaign. Here, threat actors sent the malware via email disguised as a fake Internet Explorer, using long file names and double extensions to make users believe they were opening a legitimate site. This method may have given attackers access to the victims' machines months before the attack, giving them enough time to map systems, steal credentials, and prepare for detonation. There's no clear answer to which theory is correct. Most likely, threat actors employed all of them to maximize the attack's effect. Whatever the entry point, the goal was the same: deliver the Trojan dropper. A dropper Trojan is like an envelope hiding a poisoned letter. It looks ordinary, dull, a perfectly normal envelope, so you open it without suspicion. But once opened, the poison is released and it can potentially kill you, or in this case, kill your computer. In Dark Soul, the Trojan was designed to perfectly blend in with everyday office software. When it was introduced on a computer, it would download the payloads as benign files, such as images. These files allowed the dropper to decode and run the malicious payload without getting noticed. The MBR wiper was ready to strike, erasing entire systems, obliterating Word documents, and rendering office computers across Seoul useless. Some samples were designed to begin wiping immediately upon execution. In contrast, others were set to execute at a specific time and date, precisely on the 20th of March at 2 o'clock. And some were even designed to be triggered on that date every year. Perhaps the attackers were feeling confident, or poetic. After the big crash at 2 p.m., South Koreans tried to recover as best they could. Some returned to work thanks to backup systems, and IT staff started to fix whatever systems were still fixable. Then, a few hours later, a second wave hit. Websites for LG+U, No Cut News, and several banks were suddenly defaced with images of skulls and green text, reading, "Hacked by Who Is Team." The mysterious hacktivist group claimed responsibility for the attack and bragged about stealing a massive trove of personal data. But was this just bluffing? Or did threat actors actually manage to steal the personal data of millions of users? The next day, the mystery deepened more. A second round of web defacements appeared online. We, New Romantic Cyber Army Team, verified our hashtag OpFKorea2003. We have now a great deal of personal information in our hands. We destroyed more than 0.18 million PCs. For more information, please visit Dropbox and Pastebin. The links didn't last long. The NIS took them down within seconds. No copies resurfaced online, not even in underground forums. Even though the whole operation was bizarre, the possibility of hacktivist groups being behind it was very much plausible. In 2013, website defacements and DDoS attacks were happening left and right in different parts of the world. Geoff White, author of The Lazarus Heist and a journalist specializing in cybercrime, believed that the attack aligned with the hacking landscape of the time.
We'd seen the emergence of the anonymous movement, which was a sort of marauding, quite chaotic online campaign group that attacked various targets for various reasons. In a way, the attacks were not particularly complicated. They were aiming at overwhelming servers with denial of service attacks, so servers that hold the websites that we visit. If you inundate them with enough traffic, the website will fall over and be inaccessible. It's kind of like a digital sit-in. There were defacement attacks as well, where they'd managed to break into a website, but instead of stealing data or stealing credit card numbers, they would just change the front page of the website to some insulting message. Those tactics start getting picked up by people who are either within governments or supporting governments all across the world. This happened in the Middle East, it happened in Asia and so on. If you have beef with another country, if you have issues with another country and you want to poke them in the eye and teach them a lesson, one thing you can do is go to prominent websites. Government websites, for example, are sometimes not very well protected, and you can change the front page of the website to some insulting political message. And this was exactly what was happening between North and South Korea at this time.
However, the hacktivism of Dark Seoul seemed too fabricated. Why would two groups attack the same target? Even among the more organized groups like Anonymous and Lulzsec, it's unusual to see subgroups at cross purposes and attacking the same objective. And not only that, but this attack didn't have a clear goal. Hacktivism usually retaliates against a perceived injustice, and Dark Seoul seemed to have been conducted for pure chaos. Technically, it could be a rare action where two groups come together against South Korea's domestic corruption landscape. Still, it was unlikely. Hacktivism is a social movement, and it's a must for hacktivist groups to be online in some shape or form. These two so-called hacktivists did not have an online presence. No accounts, no prior activity, no manifesto. They simply appeared out of nowhere, destroyed a bunch of machines, and vanished. The NIS had a hunch, but they couldn't jump to conclusions, not in a landscape where South Koreans were already tired of hearing North Korea did it every time something went wrong. So investigators went back to the evidence. Could it really have been hacktivists angry at the government? Could it be another threat they had not foreseen? Or was it the same familiar shadow? If you think about it, the Dark Seoul attackers could have asked for anything: money, recognition, justice, yet they demanded nothing. So what exactly was the goal here? The NIS closed their headquarters to the press. It was time to investigate. They had three theories on the table. A, it was two hacktivist groups seeking recognition. B, it was outsiders hoping to destabilize South Korea. Or C, it was the usual suspects, North Korea. First, they wanted to rule out the least likely theory, hacktivists, so they decided to look for clues that could reveal the connection between Whois team and the new romantic Cyber Army team. It didn't take long to find something strange. Both groups had used different types of wipers during the attack, but when researchers analyzed the code, they discovered that both wipers had matching elements and code segments with minor differences. They shared the same initial code. These groups were not acting separately. They were one and the same. One theory ruled out. 2 to go. Next, investigators analyzed network traffic logs to track the attack's origins. The logs showed multiple addresses, some in South Korea, but others abroad, particularly in China, something that instantly made the NIS investigators shiver. China had been a popular hiding spot for North Korean hackers, sometimes as a training ground, other times as a base for live operations. And while China is well aware of these activities, it often chooses to look the other way. At this point, the NIS's hunch began to solidify. Further investigation revealed that different parts of infrastructure were used for different parts of the attack. Some were used to exploit the patch management systems, others as command and control nodes for the remote access Trojan, and some for hosting malicious software. And yes, with infrastructure spread across different providers, tracking everything can get really messy. But ironically, the more systems you use, the more clues you leave behind. Think about it. If you had some sort of template that could help to speed up your tasks, wouldn't you use it? Hackers think the same way. But this has a bit of a problem. The more you recycle, the easier it is to track you down. In April 2013, the Korea Internet and Security Agency spokesman Chun Kil-soo announced that 22 of the addresses used in the attack had been used by North Korean hackers since 2009. Kyosu also pointed out that 18 pieces of malicious code used in Dark Seoul were tied to previous North Korean attacks. They no longer had any doubt. Their hunch had turned into proof. It was North Korea. But this is not really the end of the story. It was the end of Dark Seoul, but the beginning of something much larger, more organized, and far more deliberate. A campaign that had been quietly brewing for years. Operation Troy. Everything started with Ryan Sherstobatov, a researcher that became obsessed with Dark Seoul. Something about this incident sparked his curiosity. He wanted to understand how all the pieces fit together, the malware, the wiper, the motives. So he began digging, but instead of pulling the threads from the MBR wiper, he focused on the remote Trojan. And within the code, he found something, a reference to an originally compiled path. The messy combination of names hid two clues: the malware's name, 3RAT, and the campaign it was part of, Troy. The word Troy stood out to Ryan, so he checked if this Troy appeared in other attacks. And indeed, Troy was present in a previous South Korean attack disguised as an update tool from OnLab. But instead of silently installing malware, it showed a small window and installed a screensaver with images about the sinking of a South Korean Navy ship in 2010. Although the screensaver wasn't harmful, the program quietly dropped a malicious file named bs.dll. Ryan discovered that this file first appeared in an espionage operation known as NSTAR around 2009 to 2010. It had the exact unique string, the same communication method, and the same core code. Then came different versions of this update through 2011 and 2012, until its latest iteration in 2013, in what we know now as 3RAT. But even though the malware was evolving, its core function remained the same. It was an espionage weapon. It would help identify specific military information and pass it to threat actors if something interesting was found. And here's where things really get spicy. Ryan also discovered that this malware could destroy systems in a similar way Dark Seoul did. As of 2011, this malware only wiped its targets if it detected that it was being debugged or analyzed by a security product. There's insufficient data to know if it was perfected by 2013, or whether this is the main reason why Dark Seoul used an MBR wiper in the attack. But what we do know is this: it was designed as a stealthy cyber warfare tool to steal secrets and spread chaos.
So you're talking about tanks, guns, planes being controlled by computers, because every modern military uses digital, means to wage warfare. The idea that those computers that were helping the military could have been taken offline. The potential was there, it was never used, but that was quite worrying to the South Koreans. They suddenly realised that these weren't cyber attacks targeting just civil society. The same cyber attacks were also targeting military infrastructure. I think that was a big wake-up call for them.
So, could the Dark Seoul attack have been part of the Troy campaign? Some clues point in that direction. Firstly, the 3RAT is believed to have been compiled as early as January 2013, and possibly deployed months before the attack. That would have given attackers plenty of time to check for sensitive files and data before installing the MBR wiper. Secondly, the fake hacktivist groups involved claimed to have gotten a trove of stolen data. While some of it was allegedly leaked, other sensitive material could have easily been kept private. Perhaps this campaign was primarily directed at compiling data all along, or perhaps it was a deliberate attempt to destabilize South Korea.
And if you look at a modern society like South Korea, what's big? What do they rely on? Banking, that's big in South Korea, and media. So you attack banking, you attack media, banks, TV stations. Immediately what you're saying to the population is, you feel safe, you feel okay that you can go and get your money at any time, you feel okay you can switch on the TV and watch the news at any time. You take that for granted, we can take that away from you. We have the power, simply through using a keyboard, to take that away from you.
Dark Seoul left a clear lesson. Cybersecurity controls were not strong enough. Malware defenses failed to detect the intrusion, and even more alarming, critical monitoring and control systems failed as well. The attack alone caused around $750 million in damage, contributing to the $805 million lost between 2009 and 2013 to North Korea's cyber attacks. The NIS had no choice but to rethink the country's security strategy and build a stronger defense. First, they announced the establishment of a cyber police department dedicated to monitoring cyberspace and telecommunications. Then they promised to double their cybersecurity budget and spend $8 million by 2017, focusing on training new experts. Additionally, They announced joint forces with the USA to develop threat scenarios and enhance cybersecurity cooperation. And this time, it was not only the government taking action. Antivirus OnLab and Howry also promised to strengthen their defense and start implementing emergency updates and dedicated vaccines to detect malware as early as possible in the system. Since 2009, South Korea has lived in a state of paranoia, with the NIS becoming a case study of how psychological operations can impact a country. But destabilization is not only psychological, it is also economic. Losing millions of dollars to cyber attacks can put off investors, redirect the flow of money, and lead to longer-lasting damage in the region and potentially permeate to the rest of the world.
I think the Dark Soul attacks on South Korea, because South Korea was far away from a lot of other countries, people sort of neglect this attack and think, well, it was just a spat between North and South Korea. But actually, you're talking about a very well-developed, globally important democracy where two of the key things about democracy, flow of money and flow of information, were disrupted by a far weaker country, as far as people understand it. That's astonishing. That's a really, really amazing point in time. And if you think of how that attack might play out in any other country, countries in Europe, the US, the UK, and so on, suddenly the banks are unusable. You can't get your money out of the bank, and you can't switch on the television and find out what's going on because the news networks are down. The idea of that being done on a much bigger scale, it's absolutely terrifying. So I think that's why we need to concentrate on those Dark Soul attacks and really see the significance of them.
Then we have another reading. North Korea's cyber army was, and still is, a real threat. Their skilled hackers are precise, persistent, and effective. South Korea stands as living proof of what they can achieve.
So we've gone from attacks like Dark Soul that were disruptive, that might last a few days, to internationally significant attacks on things like the Bank of Bangladesh, National Bank of Bangladesh. We've now seen the amounts of money go up and up and up to the point where it's 1.5 billion. And now we're seeing the scope and the scale of the tactics expand again to the point where it's no longer hacking remotely from within Pyongyang. It's actually infiltrating some of the biggest companies in the world. So I don't think we're going to see North Korea's abilities plateau. I think they are going to go on and go from strength to strength. I see no signs at all of that slowing down.
By 2014, analysts believe North Korea had the capability to build its own Stuxnet. More than a decade later, one cannot help but wonder, could it be in the making as we speak, or has it already been perfected and hidden somewhere in Dalian? Speaking of Dalian, we have a couple of videos that explain what this mysterious location means for North Korea and how its hackers became one of the most skilled in the world. You can dig deeper into that world in our North Korea video, Sony Hack, and WannaCry. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed it, and see you in the next one.